Now, in the past, I didn't actually write much about fraud, but things changed probably 2012, 2013, driven by email phishing, cold calling techniques, plausible websites, and of course the ease, particularly now, that money can be transferred instantly to any destination in the world. And that has been exploited by a growing band of clever, technologically literate and organised criminals. So since then, on Radio 4 and Moneybox, we've done more and more fraud items, and Saga Magazine, which is my other major journalism outlet, I actually have a regular monthly slot now called Scam Watch. And at first, I wondered if I could fill it each month. Now, I have to decide which of the many new scams to cover and which to leave out. Now, none of that may be news to many of you here, but the more I cover it, the more I'm convinced that the steps being taken to stop fraud are inadequate. Inadequate laws, inadequate rules, inadequate response from the fraud authorities, and a totally inadequate action by the financial services industry. Clever criminals can rob us with impunity. Now, I know there's some controversy about crime statistics, but on any measure, the incidence of most crimes is actually going down. Among the few crime categories that are rising is fraud, and much of that, as we've heard, unreported. You are now more likely, on official figures, to be defrauded than burgled. And that's just the recorded ones. And young men know it's safer to sit in their bedroom robbing people online than to go outside and steal a car or mug an old lady. Let me talk to you about John, a cautious man, John. He saved his money. He used local advisors, people he met face to face. Approaching retirement, he had £120,000. He was very concerned about low interest rates, so he did his research online. He saw an advert for a financial services company. The firm emailed him back. He checked its website. It was full. It seemed comprehensive. Registered with the Financial Services Authority, as it was then. This was a couple of years ago. And the firm recommended a modest investment in a blue-chip FTSE 100 company. John thought, OK, sent them £1,000. He didn't get a share certificate. He got a document from the firm's compliance unit confirming his investment. Many shares are held by nominees now. It gives more flexibility. Further investment followed, a few £1,000s, all in blue-chip companies, all with receipts. He even had his own account number, where he could log on to the website and look at his stuff and see how it was doing. Fantastic. Bernie Ecclestone then decided to float Formula One on the stock market, and John was told, this is your big chance. I've got someone who wants to buy shares in this, but he doesn't want anyone to know. So if you buy the shares, as many as you can, the initial public offering, I'll immediately resell them to this gentleman in China, and you will make an instant profit. It's such a good deal. Liquidate everything you've got and send it to us. John did it. He sent them £120,000. And for their convenience, it was about tax, he was told. He sent it to various bank accounts in Spain and Cyprus. And he paid the £30 BACS transfer fee for each transaction. So he waited, nothing happened. He waited, he called. The number he called in Spain was dead. More time passed, and then the firm called him. Oh, there's been a bit of a hold-up, but, if you send us another £10,000, we'll probably get things moving. He told them that he couldn't do that because he hadn't got any money left. He never heard from them again. And, when I spoke to John, he still didn't quite believe that his life savings had gone. He didn't even know that Formula One in the end was never floated. Somewhere he thinks his money exists. Perhaps it's with that nice Chinese gentleman. But let's just look at what happened to John. He responded online to an advert. He was looking for the London Stock Exchange. It was a UK website, a UK-placed advert, a UK-based search engine advertising what was clearly a fraud. He checked the firm online, and it had cloned the website of a firm called Wellington Management and used that name. It had offices in similar places, and it had a fake Wellington Management site but hosted in Spain. John's UK bank transferred the money. The only question he was asked when he was sending all these different amounts to EU bank accounts was, are you money laundering? And when he said no, off it went. The money was received in various banks in the European Union. John told the regulator. It issued a notice warning people that Wellington Management GmbH was a clone of the authorised firm Wellington Management International, who had no association with it, so take care. John told the police. He got a crime number. And then, that's it. He heard nothing else. Now, if John had that £120,000 in his house, in a safe, or in maybe a valuable painting, jewellery, and his house had been broken into and stolen, he'd have had visits from detectives, scene of crime forensics, victim support, CCTV analysis of neighbouring roads, perhaps even an arrest. But because it's fraud, just unanswered questions. Why was the fake advert allowed? Why didn't his bank do more to ascertain where he was sending the money? Who ran the fake website in Spain? Why can't the crooks be traced through those bank accounts in Europe? When every step the crooks take is registered somewhere, how can they set up, collect the money and disappear? Now, I suppose the answer to all those questions is the crooks are quicker than us, cleverer than us, and better at exploiting technology than us. And John isn't the only one. William was phoned by a stranger who suggested he invested in coloured diamonds. Great return. He sent £29,000 and got a certificate of ownership, no less. Then he thought he'd cash them in and make a bit of profit. Of course, but just to make sure you don't lose out on future investment, we'll send you the diamonds, but you send us another 5,000 quid and we'll buy you another one just so you get a bit more in the future. He sent the extra money. He's heard nothing since. And this is a familiar pattern. You promise the earth, you get the money, you con them again if you can, because you know they're suckers, and then you vanish. Now, my rule is this. If someone calls with an offer to make money, just say no. No one ever lost money by turning down a cold call offer. It will always be a con. You could lose a fortune. Now, not all frauds are huge. Audrey, she's 62, and she confessed to me in an email, well, like many women in their later years, I was attracted to a product to reduce wrinkles. I've been there. So she went online and she sent for a free sample of Age Renew that reduced wrinkles by 45%, no less. But the website didn't make it clear that by ordering the free sample and putting in her card details just to pay the postage, that she was actually agreeing to pay £89 a month forever. The serum didn't work for her, wrinkles still much the same, stopped using it, but then other products arrived. And then she noticed after a couple of months that £89 was coming out of her bank every month. She contacted the firm to stop it, and they said, oh, sorry, you agreed to it when you ordered the free sample. Now, again, I advised her, stop the payments, try to reclaim them from the bank under the chargeback procedure because it was a scam, and complain long and loud to the firm. And after much toing and froing, she did write to me, very pleased, that the bank had refunded one payment and Age Renew the other. So frauds can be challenged. That's why you should always pay by credit or debit card. I get emails all the time, though, from people who, if they've not been defrauded in the legal sense, they've been duped, like people who pay £24.50 for a European health insurance card, an EHIC, which is available free from the NHS. But when you search for EHIC, the top 2 links on Google are sites that charge you to get an EHIC. They have a very plausible website address that includes the word EHIC. Similar sites will overcharge you for a driving test, a US visa waiver. Now, we've been talking about this particular scam for years, and it would be wrong to say nothing is being done. UK passports clone sites, which charged £112 for a standard £72 passport, they seem to have been stopped because 2 weeks ago, Trading Standards arrested 5 people from a firm called British Passport Services. And if you now search UK passport renewals, you get the gov.uk websites. Now, when these things happen, who are you going to call? The local police? Here's the email I got recently from my local Bobby. Our ward priorities are residential burglary, theft from motor vehicles and theft of pedal cycles. In the early hours of Saturday morning, there were 2 thefts from motor vehicles in Park Road. Looks like both vehicles were left insecure. The owners of the vehicles are away, not sure if any property was taken. Also, approximately at the same time, 3 thefts from motor vehicles in Magnolia Gardens. All 3 vehicles were not locked by owners. Please let residents know not to leave property in vehicles and to always lock their vehicles. Local policing in Chiswick. Residents, of course, meanwhile, could have been duped, swindled, conned, defrauded out of tens, hundreds, thousands of pounds. But my neighbourhood Bobby wouldn't have known about it, still less reported it, still less investigated it, and, of course, not advised anyone to beware of the simple things like a cold call that can be the first step to a fraud. Let me give you two parallel scenes in Chiswick in West London. A man took £200 out of the cash machine. He was counting it in the street, extremely silly. He was robbed. He went to the police, crime was noted, concerned coppers came round, victim support came round, CCTV examined, eyewitnesses were questioned, shops on alert for stolen notes, and man caught. Money gone, but man caught. But if you get an email from the bank and you click on it to fill in your details and then you log into your bank and all the money's gone, who do I report it to? Well, local police aren't interested, so you go to Action Fraud to report a fraud, financial and online fraud. You click on it. You go through 3 more pages answering questions, and then you click, someone has used the victim's bank or credit card details to take money from their account, and you click Next. And then it says, contact the bank, we do not need further details from you. The bank refuses to return the money, no one is pursued, no one is caught. Does anyone really care about this? The last government took fraud so seriously that in March 2014 it scrapped the National Fraud Authority, the NFA, transferred its functions to the NCA, which contains the ECC and the NCCU, using information from the NFIB, and that takes data from AF, passes some of it to the DCPCU, and separate but coordinated from all of these is the bank's FFA. If criminals were frightened of acronyms, this plan just might work. But the NCA, the National Crime Agency, as its website explains, is about serious and organised crime. And thank the Lord, it's there. It's not, though, about me losing 200 quid from my bank account. It doesn't produce an annual fraud indicator anymore, which I think is a great shame. Burglary, street robbery is taken more seriously. When you report to Action Fraud, it does face this triage system. Now, it may be made a big national investigation. It can be passed to local police. Now, often they don't have the resources, the training or the expertise to deal with fraud. So I must say, Sussex Police is perhaps an exception. In my latest Scam Watch, I read about pensioners in Sussex who've lost thousands of pounds each after being fooled by people knocking on their door, false ID, pretending to be from the Metropolitan Police, and warning that your debit card's been cloned. They then say, come to the bank, protect your money by taking it all out, and you know, we'd like to forensically examine it, so we'll send a courier around to pick it up later. You can have a password, you can trust him. That's the last they see of it. Sussex Police say about 1 in 5 of those targeted falls for that fraud. An 87-year-old man was tricked out of £10,000. And Sussex Police is doing work locally to work with local pensioners to warn them. But most frauds never get to the local police because Action Fraud's triage system leaves many as crime recorded on a growing database of cons, frauds and scams. Or even, they never get even there because they're referred to the banks, because since 2007, the deal between the banks and the police means that frauds affecting banks are dealt with by the banks. The banks decide whether to defraud the customer, and the banks, whether to refund the customer, I should say. And often, in some cases, I have to say they try and blame the customer, though that is less bad than it used to be. And then again, it's up to the bank to decide if the police should be told. And the victim is left to cope with feelings of the violation. And as I said, to the banks, these crimes are an overhead. They're part of the price we pay for the convenience of ATMs, cash machines, online banking and contactless cards. If a small percentage go wrong, never mind, as long as it's manageable. The danger is that encourages more crime because young, technologically literate people, mainly men, as criminals in all fields are, see they can bypass security, hide themselves around the world, move their money too quickly. So crimes proliferate and criminals are seldom punished. Now, there is another moment I want to share with you briefly about when people come across fraud, and that's when their bank account is frozen for no apparent reason. Kay Hickson, She was an English teacher. She'd been a Barclays Bank customer for 40 years. Before Easter, her mum gave her £6,000 by cheque. She wanted to give some money to Kay and her sister. A couple of days later, Kay went online and she couldn't get through to the account. She was told to call a number, which she did, and she was told, "Your account's been suspended. I'm sorry, I can't discuss anything with you. I can't talk about it. That's it." Well, Kay managed with cash for a day or two she had and her credit card. By Easter Monday, she was so worried she rang Barclays again. This time, the customer advisor seemed more sympathetic. "Well, you've obviously been treated very badly. I'll arrange you to have £175 compensation paid into your account. Treat yourself." She went to the ATM, put the card in. The machine kept it because the 175 quid had been paid into a suspended bank account. And when her salary and her child benefit arrived the next week, she couldn't take them out. She went to the local branch, lots of discussion about whether she could at least have her child benefit. Finally, the decision was no. She lived for a week on cash sent by her sister to her by registered post. I asked if she'd thought of trying to open a different account, and she said, "Well, no, I feel like a criminal. I'm worried if I go somewhere else, they'll say no. I've had too many rejections." She thought Barclays had treated her diabolically. Now, when we raised this, Moneybox raised this with Barclays, they wouldn't speak to us. Then they said, "Well, things might not be quite as they appear." Now, this is a very common technique of banks when you raise things with them. If you do this story, you might embarrass yourself trying to stop you doing it. But then, 2 days after we began investigating, pressing Barclays, they rang Kate to say her account had been reopened and all suspicion removed. It had been a misunderstanding. And when we pressed them further, we discovered that Santander, which was her mother's bank, had mistakenly said the cheque that had been paid in was from a chequebook it hadn't even issued, so it must be a fraud. So for that error, Kay was treated like a criminal and denied access to her own money. And I was very pleased that when she finally got in touch with Barclays, they offered her 400 quid and she stuck out for 5. And there'd been others. There was a Birmingham family sent wedding gifts from Pakistan. Cash from Pakistan, account frozen. There was Fred, a student, whose account was fraudulently used by a bank employee to push money through. He had a fraud flag put by his name and he couldn't open an account anywhere. And it took his dad nearly a year to find out exactly what had happened using detective work that he did himself. And then there was Mariella, the baby girl aged 6 months, whose bank account was frozen. James and his partner Vanessa live in Leicestershire. Mariella was christened in November and relatives and friends gave her money, so Vanessa opened a bank account for the baby at NatWest. A week later, they got a letter from the bank's account closure team. "We have with regret reached the conclusion that we will no longer provide banking facilities for you. Your account will be closed within 14 days. The bank is unwilling to enter any further discussion." And in case James and Vanessa were in any doubt, it said, "Recovery agents have been instructed to collect cards and passbooks in your possession." Well, James obviously told me it was very frightening and upsetting, and Vanessa went into the branch and closed the bank, and the staff closed the account, and the staff seemed puzzled, but they couldn't do anything about it. There was no charge against them. There was no evidence of wrongdoing, and 6-month-old Mariella was keeping very quiet about what she might have done. So they were left in banking limbo. Now, this is what I've called the Guantanamo Bay approach to justice. You treat a suspect as guilty, you refuse to disclose the charges, never mind give them any evidence against them, and if you complain, you force-feed them with nonsense. Now, in Mariella's case, eventually Moneybox got to the truth. Initially, NatWest said, well, this decision was correct. There was a person at baby Mariella's address who committed an impersonation fraud. Again, they were trying to warn us off the story. But in fact, that was again someone of a completely different name who didn't and never had lived there. So the phone fraudster wasn't, in fact, a 6-month-old baby or her relatives. She eventually got her money back and £200 from NatWest. Now, this is the guilty until proven innocent approach to suspected fraud which the banks adopt. Now, people think, well, it's a serious problem, we have to respond, and of course, it's illegal to give crooks information that we might know, it's a tipping off. But to me, it reminds them of, you chuck them in the river, if they're innocent, they sink and they're drowned, And if they float, they're supernatural and you take them away and burn them. It's witches all over again, isn't it? And these cases raise another issue that concerns me. What are these fraud flags that are applied to an account, unchecked? I'm a journalist. If I make an allegation that someone's a fraudster and they're not, and that causes them harm, I can be sued. It's no defence to say, well, sorry, I was told it by a reliable source. Ask Sally Bercow. And that's why the past chairman of the Financial Services Consumer Panel, Adam Phillips, said they were Kafkaesque. He says you can't find what you're accused of, you can't plead your case, and you're unable to open any bank account, and nothing can be done about it. And he called for new and clearer appeal procedures to be put into place. I think something may be happening. Now, if I was Mariella or Kay or Fred, I'd say I would sue, because publishing untrue information which causes financial damage is simply defamation, and it should stop. That's why journalists check things, and that's why credit and fraud agencies must check them too.